I should turn this fan off. There we go. Sweet. All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of VR Download. In case you're new here, each week we meet to discuss in virtual reality using the latest technologies to discuss the next generation of personal computing. Hello, I am your bespectacled host today, Kyle Riesenbeck, filling in for Ian Hamilton. I'm joined by my colleague David Heaney here in our very own proprietary Upload Virtual Studios. We're broadcasting live on YouTube, so feel free to post comments and questions during the show. I already see several people here. Hello to Paradise Decay and Artful. Hello, and a few other people. Ryan B, Spatial Biggs. All right, we got plenty of people in here. All right. So VR Download is also syndicated to all podcast platforms. See, you can see I haven't been on the show in a while. I'm already misspeaking. And if you like this type of quality programming to continue, we need your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing Upload content. Am I wearing an Ian costume? No, Ian is wearing a Kyle costume is typically what it is. So yes, Kyle and David. Not familiar with this combo, but I'm very excited. Well, hello. Yes, it used to be three of us, and then we cut it back because I was just cracking dad jokes the whole time, and nobody wanted to see that. So, hi, David. It's been a long time since you and I have been in the studio together. This is nice.
Yes, it has indeed. And just for anyone who's not aware, Ian is off sick today, so we apologize. We had to do this an hour later than usual, but we thought we would still do a show on the same day, just a little bit later. But yeah, this is a combo we haven't had in quite a while. We don't have a huge episode this week in terms of the number of topics, but those topics are all pretty significant. We have three things that we're going to talk about today. We'll start by talking about the Quest V66 PTC firmware data mining that Luna has done. And you can now see on UploadVR.com an article from Luna, who you may be familiar with on X or Threads if you follow them. They're a VR enthusiast that likes to get those public test channel updates as soon as possible, go through them, figure out what are the new features, and then do some data mining and figure out what are going to be the next features, because the meta programmers kind of put some clues in there in terms of what they have started to build of what will be coming next. So we'll talk about what's potentially coming next for Quest first. Our other two pieces of news are all LG related, as you probably could see in the title of the video. This is going to be an LG episode. Firstly, we'll talk about that 4K micro-OLED display they unveiled for next generation headsets that can eliminate the motion blur seen in the existing 4K micro-OLED tech used in Apple Vision Pro, a thing we hugely criticized in our review of Vision Pro. We'll finish by talking about the multiple reports that LG has delayed the high-end headset it was working on with Meta to 2027. So essentially, Quest Pro 2, a Quest Pro successor that LG was making, looks like it's been pushed quite far out in the future. And there were even some reports that LG had completely broken off the partnership with Meta, although LG denied that, however, did say it's controlling its pace. So some trouble in paradise there for sure.
You know, the firmwares, Meta has been pumping out new firmwares over the course of the last couple months for Quest 3 and I guess Quest 2 as well. Quest 1, rip. I feel so bad for Quest 1 users who just because I have several people in the house. Actually, they're on Quest 2s now. But we have Quest. What do I do with the Quest 1s? I don't know. But anyway, yes. Hello, Yerangel29. Hi, yes, I am back, baby. So we're up to Quest version 66. But somebody had pointed out earlier in the chat that Quest version, I guess it was 64, greatly increased the viability of using the pass-through. I don't know about you, but I mean, if I'm sitting here I have a desk right here, and with computers and monitors and everything, and with the pass-through lately in the last few iterations, I've been able to read things on my screen, which is crazy because that was something that kind of felt like it was the thing that the pass-through was really missing, was the ability to actually read things through the pass-through. I don't know, David, have you seen a significant increase in 64, or like was that like the apex is hitting 64 and then it hasn't improved since then? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, V64 did bring a really significant improvement to pass through. As you say, it was mainly focused on being able to read screens like your phone and monitor, and the dynamic range and the exposure control was just significantly improved. But you're also right to say that, yes, the original Quest users got screwed because they stopped getting updates back in V50. And right now we're on stable V65. And as we'll talk about very shortly here, the public test channel for V66. So it's one of those things where in a lot of cases, buying a first generation product is never a good idea. I imagine a lot of the current Vision Pro owners are going to feel pretty screwed when reportedly a cheaper and lighter Apple Vision headset comes out next year. That's just the case with a lot of these very new product categories. It's the case with, certain drones. It's the case with a lot of things. When you get the very first generation, I've heard people who work at hardware startups saying, because I work at a hardware startup, I know to never buy a V1. But a lot of people did buy the original Quest. And the thing we've always said on this show, or at least I've said, and I wrote an editorial about, is that what Meta really should be doing for those people is a trade-in program. You should be able to trade in your Quest 1 for $100 or $150 of credit towards a Quest 2 or Quest 3, ideally. And that's not something that Meta is doing. But, the trade-off there, as I said, is that by dropping that headset that has a really, really old chipset that's just anemic by modern standards, they have been, as you pointed out, able to deliver Quest updates at a really crazy pace, right? Like very few other consumer electronic devices have gotten the kind of feature updates at the pace and significance as Quest 2 and now Quest 3. It really is something where every month Meta ships an update that has at least one feature change, which is very different from what we see in the rest of the industry, where when it comes to your iPhone or your MacBook or your Pixel phone or your Android phone in general, it's generally every year that you get a major updates rather than, every single month. But there is obviously a downside to that, in that sometimes that means that there's more bugs because they're trying to do everything more quickly. But it does mean that they get the latest features out as quickly as possible.
Onakazi says here in the chat, realistically, how many Quest 1 only users are there, and what were they doing? Playing Beat Saber? And do I feel bad for iPhone 1 users as well? I feel like because of the pace at which things have been released, it's not a fair comparison to say a Quest 1 user to an iPhone 1 user. So, I mean, I kind of see what you're saying because I
would say I do. I would say I do feel I would have felt bad for, back then for iPhone 1 users. I think they were in the exact same situation, right? This isn't something unique to Meta. iPhone 1 users got screwed in the exact same way. Like a year later, Apple comes out with something that's cheaper and has 3G, whereas they're stuck on 2G. And I think they had some other things like maybe video recording or something, if I'm getting my models mixed up. But again, this is the issue of being a early adopter, of buying the first generation hardware. You're always going to get screwed. But to Onakazi's point, yes, there are very, very few people that are still using a Quest 1 today. Quest 2 launched at $100 cheaper and only 18 months after. So, a lot more people bought a Quest 2 than a Quest 1. It's just, if you were one of those people, you were the first to support Meta's standalone 6DoF platform, you paid a higher price and got a product that didn't last as long. But
so here's a member is saying, personally, I wish Quentin, by the way, Quentin M. Personally, I wish Meta would push out less large updates than many small updates. It would probably help their cohesion problems. So I have this thought on all of these little tiny updates and whether or not I would rather see one big one or a bunch of little ones. I'm actually going to disagree with you, Quentin. I think that a bunch of little updates is important, especially when I look at it from the comparison of what is an actual new feature versus what's something that should already be there. So, for example, the improvement on the pass through in version 64, that wasn't a new feature. That was the way it should have been at launch. And I think sometimes when you have these updates, they're actually fixing things that were bugs at launch that now they have fixed, features that don't work exactly the way that they should. And so for me, they're providing me closer to the product that I had anticipated when I bought it. Am I saying that in a way that makes sense, David, to you?
Yeah, I get what you mean. And there are other ones that are legitimate updates, right? Like a lot of the time these days, you see a hardware product announced and one of its flagship features arrives a few months later with the
Yeah.
iPhone's night mode, for example. I can't remember which one it was to introduce it, but for the camera, it actually arrived like a few months later. They do that sometimes with the enhanced portrait mode. And with Quest 3, the big one was obviously inside out body tracking, right? That was a huge flagship feature for Quest 3, but it arrived in December, whereas Quest 3 arrived in October. And sometimes you're just in this situation where the hardware engineers have the hardware ready and the software engineers don't have the software side ready. So, we live in this age of over the air update. It's not like the olden days when you had to, plug something into a computer and like flash some firmware. It's all just over the air. Even cars are starting to work like that now, which is to some people crazy and to other people a very interesting thing. But let's talk specifically about the V66 update and what Luna found in testing it out. So again, this is the current version of Quest out there is V65 stable. This is the public test channel for V66 that Luna is trying and data mining. And so to be clear, it's not always the case that a feature that's in the PTC, public test channel, arrives in the stable version, but it usually is, and it often heavily indicates what's coming next. So the flagship feature that they found, and you can see the footage on uploadvr.com in their article, is a experimental option that lets you change the hand tracking buttons from gestures to actually being a button on your wrist, right? So right now, if you are using hand tracking on a Quest, you pinch on your index finger to your thumb on your right hand for the meta system menu, or you do the same on your left hand for the apps menu. App can implement something happening once you pinch with your left hand. We used to have it in this studio that brought you back to the menu out of the current studio, but Ian pinched so often that we took that away to stop that occurring. This is a very interesting alternative where if you want, instead, you would now just touch your finger to your wrist where you would see on each side. So that's obviously an option for people who want it. It'll be interesting to see whether this over time becomes the default or whether this just becomes an option. There are, on phones for a long while, there were plenty of Android phones that let you choose between using swipe gestures to go back home versus pressing a physical button at the bottom. I think with headsets, it's going to be the same thing for a while, where there are different options. I'm seeing multiple people in the comments, Spatial Biggs and Ramvis, say that wrist sounds so much nicer or better. So there's definitely some people at least that like this idea. Personally, I'm a big fan of the pinch. I often find myself missing it on Vision Pro. One of the things I criticized in my Vision Pro review is that to bring up the menu in Vision Pro, you have to reach your hand up and press a button on the top of the headset. Whereas on Quest, I just go like that, right? And you can see, obviously, my tablet moved down as I brought up the system menu. And I really like pinching, but it seems that there are multiple people in the comments that disagree with me. We have another person, Mr. Lord Beavis, saying pinching is a pain in the ass. Using virtual watch is so much better. I think over time, I find self-haptics a little bit fatiguing, right? If I'm like tapping against my wrist, I'm kind of like hitting a vein over and over. Not my favorite thing to do, but I'm happy that they're putting this as an option, right? Even if I prefer pinching, it's clear here from our comments that there are plenty of people who do not want that. And so it's great that there are different options. The problem, of course, is that apps will have to not use the option that the user is using, right? Because right now, if you're building a Quest app, you cannot use a right pinch, because a right hand pinch from index finger to thumb, because the system is using that. Anytime that happens, the system menu comes up. So an app can't use that. Now, the problem is if the user has chosen to use wrist buttons, then it's now that you can't make a wrist button, because you, on the right hand at least, because when they do that, they're going to bring up the system menu, not their one. So Meta's going to have to figure out a way here of either providing an API that tells developers what is the user currently using, or over time, they're just going to have to pick one, give it to everyone, and then developers can build around that. So that is a case where options can actually be a bad thing for developers. Do you have any
I
thoughts on
think
the wrist buttons?
I mean, okay, so I don't care one way or the other. Honestly, I'm ambivalent about where the button is, as long as it works when it's supposed to. Like just getting into the studio and getting out of the studio, I was having a hard time, and I had to adjust the lighting in my room, and that's fair because that's you need good lighting to be able to do good tracking. But having it on the wrist versus having it on the palm of my hand versus the back of my hand versus the back of my wrist versus the elbow buttons. I mean, come on, just whatever it is. And I know this is a pipe dream, but just find an industry standard and have everybody use it, which is never going to happen. Sorry, because Apple has to put buttons on their headsets and little reality wheels or whatever the heck we're calling them. I like the option to give options. How about you go into the menu and you just main menu of the headset and system settings and say, okay, I want my, like right now I'm seeing the app button and the the meta menu button kind of hovering in between my fingers, and I could see them and I could pinch them, but maybe I don't want that. But if it was just down here on my wrist, or maybe even in the palm of my hand, I don't know. But I didn't think about what you said, like the game developers themselves. If you've got something like a Pip-Boy or something, you've already got a menu on your
Yeah.
wrist. I mean, look at Alex or whatever, any other games. You already have menus that you can pull up. But so yeah, the game developers. I wonder. See, that's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know from a game developer. Do you think that this is a good idea? Or do you think that the wrist is a bad idea? Because our opinion as users, as reviewers, as writing news about it, is going to have a different opinion than what the developers. And then, your heavy gamers, like the gamers who are playing multiple types of games, multiple titles that have different menus. And so, I mean, how much do you really care if you're golfing? If you're in Walkabout, how much do you care where the menu is versus if you were playing a game like, pick any other game. Like, what would the menu look like on, one of the emulators, or what would the menu look like in, Beat Saber even?
Yeah. I think when it comes to controller-based games, this becomes less of an issue, obviously, because it's a physical button. But in hand tracking games, you're right to say that as well as developers needing to know what it is consistently on one platform, the issue I brought up with what happens if you have a wrist button here already, consistency between platforms definitely is going to be a huge problem, right? Because say that you do have a wrist-based UI here, and so then Meta switches over to using a wrist-based button, say that like in V70 or something, they change over completely. Well, then you may have that on Vision Pro or on another VR platform, and then you can't do it on Metas anymore. So eventually you do hope this will become industry standard, right?
Yeah.
When the iPhone switched over to taking away the home button and using a swipe up gesture, that eventually over time, Android phones started to adopt that exact same thing, right? And now every time you use a smartphone, it's pretty much the exact same on all of them. You swipe up all the way to bring up your home screen, or you swipe up halfway to bring up the apps. Consistency. I often say that in the debate that people constantly have between, is iPhone or Android better, they have converged so much that there is almost no difference compared to if you're using like a Mac versus Windows. There are actually significant differences in how the operating system feels for you. If you're using a modern Android phone and a modern iPhone, they feel almost identical. But right now, using a Quest and a Vision Pro, the interaction experience is completely different.
Well, trigger warning for everyone. David, the reason is because Apple, Android was stealing all of the features from Apple. Don't you know that Apple developed all of those features first, and then Android stole them? That's why there's a convergence. But no, it is interesting. Blair, Anti-Cleric, the developer for the game Lo-Fi, says there's already a button on your wrist when you play his game. So, I mean, there's
your sarcasm is triggered at least a few people, and I'm sure there will be at least 20% of people who won't pick up on the sarcasm. To be clear, yes.
I wish I was in my Quest Pro so you could see my intense laughing and smiling right now.
I mean, the reality is
based.
they've each copied each other significantly, and users have
Sure.
been better off for it, right? There are
Yeah.
many features. I mean, copied maybe isn't even the right word. They hire the same people, right? The Silicon Valley has very typically short tenures. People work at a company for 18 months and then pop over to their competitor and do the exact same thing for 18 months. Every time Android adds a major feature, a couple of years later, Apple adds it to iPhone. And every time iPhone adds a major feature, a couple of years later, Google adds it to Android. It's really, whether you want to call that copying or just
Well, no,
them,
it's pollination is what's happening. So these
yeah,
little bugs, these little bees that go in from 18-month, contracts from this company to this company, and they're just, here I've implemented this feature here. Go to this company, implement the same feature here. Go to this company, do the same thing. You're right, there is, and there's a lot. I mean, they're all coming out of the same school of thought, top of the same professors, the same colleges, and they're all learning the same design things. And then next thing you know, everybody's icon for their app is a lowercase letter with a same color background. I don't know. It's very
yeah.
bizarre.
There's
Very
definitely a
bizarre.
lot of cross pollination, as you say. Thomas Ireland makes a good comment to bring this back to VR and AR. We are still in the Stone Age on UX for VR, MR devices. Trial and error will get there. Yeah, we're still, as we point out on the show many times, this is still the early days of headsets. We haven't even got to the early days of AR glasses yet. This is all the beginning. I know that sounds crazy because it's been a decade since the Oculus DK2. It's been, 12 years since the Oculus Kickstarter, but technologies, what people in the recent era have forgotten because everything is framed as if everything began with the iPhone. Genuinely new technology paradigms spawn and evolve on the scale of decades, not a few years, right? This is still the early decades of VR and AR. And eventually there will be all of this standardized, and you will put on a headset, and no matter which manufacturer, you pretty much know how to use it instantaneously. But we're just not there yet because we don't know what the best ways are yet, right? Meta has its own idea of what's the best way. Apple has its idea. And I'm sure Google and Samsung will have their own idea when they eventually come out with their headset. And we're still even hardware limited, as ADR2T points out. The Quest 3, for example, doesn't have eye tracking, so it can't implement Vision Pro's style interaction system. But there's also just that there are genuinely different views on what's the best way to do this so far. So let's just quickly run down some of the other findings in Quest V66 PTC. That this was the flagship one, the one that will most change your day-to-day usage. But we're also seeing, Luna is also seeing, if I correct myself there, a evidence that there will be a downloads folder in the app library. So there is some code referencing the fact that just like when you're on Steam and you can click downloads and see the progress of each download, you'll have like a dedicated tab in the UI to see app downloads and app updates and be able to kind of change which one you want to be higher priority and cancel one and reschedule one. Whereas right now the only way you kind of see that is in notifications or on each app's tile. So that's obviously just a useful thing. The introduction of the Meta AI assistant. We've talked on the show before about how the Ray-Ban glasses have Meta AI so that you can ask it questions in the same way you would ask ChatGPT, and you can also, on the glasses, you can say, you can ask questions about what it's seeing. So you can say, what do you see? Or you can say, translate this sign for me. Or you can ask a question like, for how many minutes when I need to cook this? Just typical examples of multimodal AI that can accept visual input as well as text input via voice. So there are code strings that reference that eventually coming to Quest 3. So you would be able to use the Quest camera to ask visual questions or just ask general questions with your voice. And those strings suggest that will replace the current hard-coded voice commands on Quest. There are also code strings referencing a sensor lock privacy feature. So this feature would mean that when you take your Quest off, as in when the proximity sensor between the lenses no longer indicates that there is a face wearing the headset, the microphone and cameras will turn off completely so that you never have to worry that your headset in any way is capturing its environment or audio when you're not wearing it. Now, you may wonder, why isn't that always the case? Well, the answer is because tracking is constantly running until the headset goes into hard standby so that it's ready to go, right? So you pick up your Quest And by that motion of picking it, you activate the accelerometer. Now that starts the system. It samples the cameras, gets them going, starts tracking your environment. And by the time you put your headset on, tracking is just working, and it's got a great view of your whole room. And you don't need to worry about like it's going to drift or something. Tracking is ready to go. If you're someone who has significant privacy concerns, if you're in an environment such as a government building that requires certain privacy things, that's obviously going to be a feature you want. Or if it's just you just don't feel comfortable with the idea of the device ever being able to see that, but you'll have to accept the trade-off that tracking will probably take longer to initialize.
Wait a minute, David. Hold on. So just so we're clear here, so I'm on the headset and I take it off and I go and I put it behind me on the table. It can still see until it goes to sleep. It can still see everything on my screen and it's listening and it's watching what I'm doing on my computer over my shoulder when the headset is currently just sitting there after I've used it for an extended period of time. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And the tracking system is still running, right? But I mean, we're talking, to be clear, the tracking system runs on device, right? We're not talking about something sending imagery off to meta servers. We're not talking about anything on the network at all. This would be the case if your headset had never seen the internet since it was set up. This is just a computer vision algorithm looking for high contrast features in your room to position the headset, looking for the controllers. And so the advantage you get there is that when you pick that back up, tracking is ready to go, that it's getting a better view of your room. So even, for example, you can more easily, in a shorter time, have the Guardian boundary detected, right? Because sometimes on the older software for the original Quest and Quest 2, before they improved this, you would have to put on the headset and then look around your room for quite a long time until it actually remembered the Guardian boundary. Now, they've significantly improved this, but one of the ways they do that is that from the time that you pick the headset up, it's looking around the room trying to figure out where are those unique features. And I'm not talking about like, high level features that we as humans see. I just mean like high contrast lines, right? Like you have a painting on the wall or there's a pattern in your carpet, things like that they can use to pick up where is the headset at the moment. And so, if you are someone who just really doesn't want this to happen, it looks like Meta will give you a sensor lock privacy feature.
So nobody's actually like watching through the headset me streaming My Little Pony episodes, so that's not going out, because I don't want everybody to be able to see my stuff and know that friendship it's magic. That's not my job to tell the world that. So but you're saying like right now nobody is actually watching this, so why do we need this feature then?
For the same reason that there are privacy features in other devices, right? A lot of this is a controversial answer, I guess, and a controversial question, but there are ways in which people feel uncomfortable about even a emotionless piece of software processing sensor input, even if it doesn't go over the network, right? Privacy in the most sort of rational sense might mean you don't want it to be possible for another human to see certain personal data, but it also just means that you don't want a piece of software to be able to do this as well for certain people. There is a comment from Creative Experiment saying they send the data to Meta, dude. Even using a camera to take a photo increases data usage on the internet once you just open the photo app. So if you're talking about like taking a screenshot on your Quest, then yes, that does get sent to Meta's servers in the same way that's taking a screenshot on Apple with iCloud enabled or on a Android phone with Google Photos enabled does, because that's how it syncs to your phone, right? It's a cloud photo library. You can turn that off. You can turn off cloud syncing in the camera app of the Quest headset. It just means you won't be able to bring up that photo on your phone. I agree with you that it should do a point-to-point sharing like it does for the Ray-Ban glasses. You take a picture on the Ray-Ban glasses and it creates a Wi-Fi direct temporary network from your glasses to your phone and sends the photos over. With Quest, for whatever reason, they upload it to a cloud library that is obviously encrypted to your account and then comes back down to your phone. But it's not the camera, it's not the imagery from the headset itself, right? The tracking data is not being sent to Meta servers. That would be
I don't know.
very noticeable.
I don't know. Guy Godin here is saying that there might be some folks in India that are looking at my stuff and that I should be careful. So when I'm, using virtual desktop to stream VR 180 videos of My Little Pony, then I don't want my headset to be able to see that. I don't know. Well, that's fine because that's this whole data mining thing is very interesting to me, to look for lines of code to possibly introduce features or to mention features. And we all know that you have to name things conventional stuff as opposed to new variable x underscore one underscore one underscore final underscore draft. You don't want, you need to give your lines in code, valuable information. I do want somebody, if he's not in the comment or he's not watching live here, somebody let Sadly It's Bradley know that there were 14 mentions of the name Deckard also in the Quest V66 code data. No, I'm kidding. But just tell him that anyway. See what he says. For those of you who aren't watching that whole thing, Bradley has a love-hate relationship with the word Deckard. So I'm offering him right now $1,000 to have the word Deckard tattooed on his forehead. Again, just kidding. But sorry,
Sadly,
David.
Bradley is in our comments there offering us.
There he is. There he is, Brad. All right, there you go.
Seems possible that for a split second you give him even more what's the word, stress of thinking that you were serious for a second. To be clear, both Kyle is joking and the comment Kyle read out from Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop. Guy Godin, for our listeners that don't see the comments, has followed up by saying, "I'm kidding, of course." I do need to be clear here. There is no evidence of any sort of camera imagery going to meta servers. And Onakazi points out, where do people hear about their phones, right? I always think this is very funny when it comes to discussion of privacy of headsets, right? People carry around a device that has cameras on both sides, usually 3 cameras on the back, a very high quality camera on the front, like usually 5 or 6 microphones in the flagship phones now. And they are walking around with this. They take it into the bathroom as they go to the toilet. And then they turn around and go, "Oh, my headset has a camera. Oh, what might happen there?"
We test it all the time. My wife and I will have a conversation. We were having a conversation about candles, like Woodwick candles or something. Next thing you know, there's an ad on Spotify for Woodwick candles. I'm getting stuff in Twitter, or I refuse to call it X, Twitter and Facebook, and all these ads for Woodwick candles. So I started trying it out. There's a local restaurant here called Bob Evans, and I'm like, I'm going to keep mentioning Bob Evans to all of my devices to see how long it takes. Weirdly enough, I have not gotten a single Bob Evans ad, and I think it's because they can't afford to produce one because they're that terrible of a restaurant. And that is definitely me being serious. So, you're right. People are worried about privacy, but then they post their entire lives on social media. So how much privacy do you really want? Well, I don't know. Down on the farm. Onakazi knows. See, there you go.
There are people who are obviously have very legitimate concerns for privacy. It's just, I just do think you should probably care about the supercomputer in your pocket that you carry with you 24 hours a day that's covered in sensors, if that is your concern. But there are people who have legitimate concerns. I see someone in the comments here claiming that they do tape up all of their cameras and on their devices. That's a valid thing. Even Mark Zuckerberg himself has been spotted with his laptop webcam having a physical cover over it. There are certain laptops that have like a hardware level LED, so the camera physically cannot be operating without the LED also showing. But that's something where you may not trust that your particular laptop model does have that. But yeah, let's talk about some of these other features that have been found by Luna in the V66 PTC firmware. So calendar sync is one of them. It looks like Meta, presumably based on this string that's found in the code, plans to add a calendar app to Quest, I guess just as part of making it a general computing device to try and match some of the capabilities of Vision Pro. There is evidence of a improved do not disturb mode in the works. There is evidence of some improvements to Bluetooth, including quick pair, so that you bring a device up near it and put it in pairing mode and you get prompted on the headset to pair. There's also evidence that you'll be able to pair controllers inside the headset, which you currently have to do through the mobile app. The most interesting finding, though, for me is one called content adaptive brightness. So this is something that Luna has found in the firmware. And there is the text here suggests that it will actually adjust the brightness in real time in supported apps so that you get better contrast, even though it's an LCD display. So the exact text is improves the overall contrast in dark scenes by providing truer blacks, but may have adverse effects for certain content. So to me, this suggests that when you're in a completely black screen, a loading screen on Quest 3 right now, but you have your Quest 3's brightness set all the way full, that seems like a waste of your LCD backlight. It also seems like it's not necessary. Theoretically, why couldn't Meta have the system bring the backlight all the way down when you're in a dark scene and then bring it up more and more in brighter scenes? Now, this is something that LCD televisions have been doing for decades, at least a decade, likely more, as an option. It can be quite noticeable as a problem, of course, because this isn't like the mini LED local dimming that you have on something like the Quest Pro, where there are lots of little LEDs underneath the LCD that are illuminating different parts at different brightnesses. Even that can be blotchy, right? This is just the whole backlight getting brighter or dimmer, and that could be really noticeable. I guess that's what they mean may have adverse effects for certain content. If you were in something that is rapidly changing the overall brightness of the scene from really, really bright to really, really dark, you might get almost like a flashing effect. But if you were in something where you're in like a horror game and you're in a dark scene and you don't need brightness, you want it to be dark, right now, you could manually go in and every time you play, bring down your Quest 3's brightness and trade off some, overall brightness for better blacks. But the content being able to do that on a software level seems like if it's done right, could be a very clever idea. Now, I think that's the big caveat here. It's going to really depend on the quality of the algorithm. Sadly, it's Bradley in the comments saying global dimming is really bad. Usually, I very much so agree from what I've seen on LCD televisions, though. I would wager that the algorithm on LCD televisions that did this, keep in mind that there haven't been high-end LCD TVs without local dimming for 5 years at least now. Like the only LCD TVs out there that have global dimming are the lower end ones anyway, where they put less focus in. They have these really anemic chipsets that lag when you open the Netflix app and takes 30 seconds. So I would wager that with the better compute on something like a Quest and serious effort by Meta's engineers, they may be able to pull off something that doesn't look terrible, but I agree with your skepticism. I can't imagine global dimming looking particularly great. The question is it a better trade-off than no global dimming at all?
I have that on my television and I turned it off immediately. I do not like it. I agree with you, Bradley, that global dimming is really bad. I don't want that. I don't actually, to go in and to turn my brightness down. Imagine if you got your brightness to the level that you liked it, and then you go into like a low lit horror genre game, and then it dims even further, and it's it's so annoying. So that's a great feature, but man, they better make it a toggle that I can turn off.
Sure, but I mean, it does look like a toggle is what they are planning on here. And again, this is not a feature that's in V66. This is just there are code references to it being developed. But I would say that is true, that it's annoying. But what's more annoying is those horrible LCD gray blacks, right? Arguably the biggest issue when you're using a Quest 3, is the LCD blacks. The fact that it cannot produce the color. You cannot see the color black in your virtual environment when you're using a Quest 3 or a Quest 2 or a Valve Index, right? Any headset that uses LCD, you just can't, because they always have to have the global backlight on, and that means that there's always going to be this haze, this gray haze. And when you use an OLED headset for the first time, whether it be a Quest 1 or an Apple Vision Pro or a big screen beyond, usually your first reaction is holy shit, right? It is bigger than it sounds, and it is a huge shame that we are still in a world where LCD is so much more affordable for this kind of pixel density and form factor. Um, Eventually, it's hard to imagine eventually that we won't eventually get to a world where every headset is using micro OLED. And to be clear, eventually means a very, very long time scale. We will need to get to a world where producing micro OLED displays is at the same kind of cost. We'll talk about that a little bit more in our next topic. But content
Simeon
adaptive
has
brightness.
Yeah, Simeon has a comment here. He said that he doesn't mind the LCD grays. And you know what? I'm the same way. I get it. In that perfect world, the cheap OLED that doesn't have the blur, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, but I don't mind the grays. I understand where it comes from. I get it. I grew up with that. So it's
sure. But how often do you play VR games that are taking place either in space or in a really dark environment like a horror game? To me, sure, it doesn't matter when you're in Walkabout Mini Golf or something, or you're in a game that's set during a daytime environment. But when it gets to nighttime, it really, really is noticeable. And in space, that's where it really ruins, because the ability to look out into a space scene in an OLED headset and see like a true darkness, that true feeling of being in deep space with, punctuated by like a planet or some stars or a nebula, that's something that you just cannot ever get on an LCD headset. And anytime I'm using something on a Quest or a Valve Index where it's supposed to be in space, I never truly feel like I'm in space because of that. And there's always this feeling of, God, I wish I was playing this on an OLED headset right now.
Man, in an OLED headset in space, no one can hear you scream about the LCD grays. All right, well, let's talk about some screens that. Well, are we all done with the data scrape here? Luna did a fantastic job of this.
Yeah, they definitely did. And there's only two more very small things. One of them is a custom virtual keyboard sizing and positioning. So today, on Quest, your virtual keyboard is kind of locked to your dock. The dock here. It looks like they're working on allowing you to kind of have the keyboard as its own movable thing, like on Vision Pro. The other one is there is one little string that suggests they are working even further on bringing codec avatars. We talked a while ago about how there were references in the Quest firmware to codec avatars, suggesting they're actually starting to productize that research now. They're on the path to bringing it into a real Quest headset or another Horizon OS headset. But there's another string here that references their calibration. So, we don't expect this to happen anytime soon, and maybe even not on any of the headsets that are here today, but it does look like Meta is at the very least working on a real product that will integrate these codec avatars to try and compete with what Apple has with their spatial personas on Vision Pro.
So you think when they do these, are we going to have to like hold the headset out and like scan our faces like they do with the Vision? Apple Vision?
Yeah, the research they showed had you do it on a smartphone. So that's one path. They have it done through the MetaQuest app. The problem is they probably want to rely on the iPhones that have those true depth sensors on the front, and then you would kind of lock everyone else out. Today, if this was coming to something like Quest 3, there wouldn't be a huge advantage to using the front of the headset. You do have this depth projector, but it's very sparse compared to something like a iPhone's true depth sensor. But I would imagine, yes, that if, say, they are working on this for Quest Pro 2, which we'll again talk about later on in the show, they probably will go with the same approach of having a dense depth sensor on the front that can do that.
Because I don't think the Quest Pro or the Quest 3 has the ability to do this level of poly scanning, does it? I mean, that's
no, absolutely not. To be clear, though, what does happen with codec avatars, we don't want to talk about this too much, but it's not like that. It's not a poly scan. It's a end-to-end machine learning based system where this is generated by a neural network. None of this is being done in any kind of conventional sense, but we'll talk about that when we have more codec avatars specific news on another date. Let's go straight in and talk about that LG display, get to our second of three topics today, because it's something that does hold a lot of promise, although there is the caveat that we don't actually know if this is going to go into production. We don't know if LG plans to put this in a product. Well, all we know is that they showed it off. And the reason that this one is interesting is because it has double the brightness of the Vision Pro's micro OLED display. And so you may kind of wonder, why would you want double the brightness? Let's just start by saying why you want micro OLED displays in the first place, right? So right now, Quest 3 is 2K per eye, and that's an okay resolution for gaming. It can be fine for experiences, but when it comes to virtual productivity and you want to have screens and you want to have small text, you can really quickly run into the issues of why 2K per eye just isn't enough. And you can get 4K LCD displays, and we've seen some companies like Vario with their XR4 put in a 4K LCD. The problem is, because LCD's pixel density cannot rival micro OLED, they have to be bigger. And so you get a bulkier headset design that looks more like the last generation of headsets than these sleeker pancake lens-based headsets. So right now, in terms of production-ready display technologies, micro OLED is the only game in town when it comes to getting to really dense pixel densities in terms of what can actually be produced. And so you can get a headset that is relatively slim, like Vision Pro, and has really high resolution, near 4K per eye in Vision Pro's case. And of course, you get OLED's signature infinite contrast. And we already see micro OLED displays in Big Screen Beyond. There's a 2.5K display there, and of course in Vision Pro with the 3.7K. So what makes LG's different? Why is LG saying that this is for next generation headsets? It's what that double the brightness enables. Because one of the biggest issues right now with Vision Pro is that it has this persistent smear, this annoying motion blur that as you move your head, not just in the pass-through, that's a separate reason, but even in virtual content, there's this little bit of persistence. The pixels seem to you as if they're staying around a little bit too long as you move your head. And that doesn't happen in a Quest. You look around in a Quest and everything looks kind of crisper in a way that almost sounds counterintuitive, because a Quest is much lower resolution. If you keep your head perfectly still in a Vision Pro, you get that incredible clarity. But as soon as you move it, the illusion breaks. And one of the reasons they have to do that is that they have to keep each pixel illuminated for longer, because the pancake lens destroys most of the brightness. And then the less that you illuminate the pixels per frame, the less time in milliseconds per frame that the pixels are illuminated, the less perceived brightness again. So with double the brightness, what this LG display would be potentially capable of would be getting rid of that. So instead of actually delivering a headset that's twice as bright, you would go for the same brightness, but illuminate the pixels for double the time each frame, half the time each frame, and then get rid of that annoying smear. And there are also some other advantages here, some more minor ones. LG is also saying it has higher resolution. So Vision Pro is 3.7K by 3.2K. LG's is 3.8K by 3.8K, essentially what you would call 4K. Also a wider color gamut. Apple's Sony display is 92% DCI-P3, whereas LG's is 97% DCI P3. So we are getting, higher resolution, double the brightness, which can be used to eliminate motion blur, and a wider color gamut. Now, the issue is, as Bradley points out in our comments, it is using a triple white OLED stack instead of a dual white. So it is likely to cost more to produce, not less, and have even worse yield issues. So this kind of technology shows you a potential near-term improvement for micro OLED displays to get rid of that, but it doesn't solve the biggest problem of micro OLED displays, which is the extreme difficulty of manufacturing and the cost. For that, we will need different approaches to how micro OLED displays are made, and that's something that is not going to go into mass production in the near term.
So I have a few things to say here. Number one, at what point are we going to have screen heads like we have gear heads with people who are like really into cars? When are we going to have screen heads where they come out and they're like, yeah, my OLED, it goes from 0 to 10,000 nits in 0.02 milliseconds. Like, when are we going to start talking about it like that? Because really,
I think we are already.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, those are the measurements that we use. Is how quickly can this pic?
I think you
Whoops.
muted yourself there.
Yeah, I just muted. How quickly can this pixel light up, get to a specific light intensity number, and then turn back off? Like that's where we're at right now with OLED. It's not a matter of, oh, the blacks are so black because the pixel's off. No, it's how fast can this thing get super bright and then turn off. That's the measurement that we need. So you screen heads out there, come up with a way to, a nomenclature for that sort of thing. Now, I am also going to say here, I can't remember who said it now. Clay Man here, referencing the AVP used for the Apple Vision Pro versus Alien versus Predator. I refuse to say AVP because what are they going to call? What are you AVP folks going to say when the next one that comes out is called the Apple Vision Inspire? Are you going to call it the AVI? I mean, what are you going to do? The fact that you've added that pro into the name, AVP, like what if they change it completely and call it the Apple Super System? Like, what are you people going to call it? You AVP people.
Yeah, I agree with you there. AVP is not a good way to.
I am very anti-AVP.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree with you because if it's Vision Air, then the next one is AVA and AVP. Just call it the Vision Pro. It really isn't. It doesn't take that many more letters to say Vision Pro, right? It's really not gonna.
I'm gonna start referring to my Meta Quest 3 as MQ3.
Yeah, I see some people do that. It seems ridiculous. The other thing is, if someone isn't familiar with their algorithm, with your acronym, they're going to say, "What's an AVP?" And there already is Alien versus Predator. But I don't think this is a hugely important thing. When it comes to screen heads, I'd say we've had that for a decade, right? As someone pointed out in the comments here, I believe it was, damn it, it's annoying when I can't find a particular comment. Someone pointed out anyway that gamers have been like this for a very, very long time, right? When it comes to monitors, PC gamers have cared about all of these things when it comes to monitors. If you're someone who's really into home entertainment, you're watching 4K Blu-rays, you've cared about this on your TV, your OLED TV for a very long time. And I think VR has really cared about this too, right? Because one of the main limiting factors for VR headsets has been from the very start displays. I still remember that, in the consumer space, this started with the Rift and the Vive with 1K per eye displays, that today you would put one of those on and just think, wow, this is ridiculously low resolution. We used to talk about the screen door effect, which people talk about. It's got a more broad meaning these days, where people seem to talk about any pattern or lines or any display, any evidence of the underlying display itself gets called a screen door effect. But that used to have a very specific usage, which meant you could actually really see the giant spaces between the pixels, which were more prominent in some of the earliest headsets before the Rift and the Vive, like the Oculus DK1, for example, than the actual pixels themselves. You were seeing almost more of the gaps between the pixels than the pixels themselves, which is why you had this idea of looking at a screen door. So, we have gotten so far in that time. We've gone from these originally, like the PSVR 1, for example, was sub 1K per eye. And then today we're in 2K headsets in the mainstream pricing, and you can, on the high end, you can get, near 4K, and soon we'll probably have headsets that are in the between $1,000 and $2,000 range that also have the 4K per eye resolution. Sadly, it's Bradley in our comments is pointing out that that new better way to make micro-OLED displays that I was referencing, true RGB micro-OLED that will be able to have much better brightness and color gamut and some other things is coming. It's coming in a few years. They expect it to arrive in the kind of 2027 timeframe. And they say it's also why they don't expect Vision Pro 2 will cost less. Yeah, that's a very valid thing to point out. It looks like, as we've said on this show before, Apple is going to have two different product lines. The Vision headset line is an entire category of product, right? There's going to be a Vision Pro 2, but there'll also be a Vision Air or a Vision just without anything at the end, just an Apple Vision, just like you have an iPad and an iPad Air and an iPad Pro, and you have a MacBook Air and a MacBook Pro. There's going to be different product lines that in the highest end one, you get the newest, best tech for the highest price. And then in the consumer one or the more mainstream one, it adopts some of the original features in a more affordable package with some less premium materials and fewer features, for example.
So let me pick your brain real quick here, David. So this display, this OLED screen, this is going to be expensive still. This is still going to have some cost to it. And so when this goes into a headset, that headset is going to be $1,500, $2,000, maybe more dollars, because it needs to have pancake lenses or you'll literally fry your retinas from all of those nits. What would happen, like, if you were to put a Fresnel lens? So we know, or we suspect, that the Quest 3S, which is going to confuse people because people are going to think it's a super or something. The light version of this thing is potentially going to have Fresnel lenses. You don't need something this potent with a Fresnel lens. Do we know where the costs stand on the types of screens that would look good with a Fresnel lens, needing only, maybe 1,000 nits of light to be able to work correctly? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Fresnel lenses are much more optically efficient. They're still not great. You're still losing a lot of the brightness. But one thing I want to just push back on there is the idea that even if you did have a display like this with its 10,000 nits, and you had a magic lens that somehow had no optical loss and you were getting it to your eye, that's not going to fry your eyes, right? In the same way that walking outdoors doesn't fry your eyes. An outdoor day, a sunny day, is tens of thousands of nits. It can be hundreds of thousands of nits at the most bright. You can, if you look up at the sun for like a flash second, that's going to hurt your eyes, but that's like millions and millions and millions of nits. I have actually tried a headset with 20,000 nits before, one of Meta's Starburst prototype. We talked about it on the show at the time. You can Google UploadVR Meta Starburst headset to read my impressions of that. It did not fry my eyes. In fact, it was great. It offered a level of immersion that really added to the experience, right? I think we have a long way to go with brightness on these headsets. The ideal display and the ideal headset would allow you to see the darkest pitches black through self-illumination like OLED, and the brightest day. You should be able to simulate what it feels like to walk outdoors on a sunny day in a headset, and that wouldn't be a problem in a headset like this. To be clear, when it comes to cost, though, you do need pancake lenses to magnify a display this small over a reasonable field of view. When you have a Fresnel lens, you have these much larger displays. In something like Quest 3S or Quest 3 Lite, whatever it ends up being called, that's almost certainly going to use an LCD panel, probably the same one as Quest 2. The cost difference is enormous, right? When it comes to the displays that are in Apple Vision Pro, the micro-OLED displays from Sony, the estimates there put it at around $350 per display, so $700 per headset. In comparison, the kind of LCD that's in a Quest 2, that single panel, is on the order of $20 or $30. We are talking about an order of magnitude difference in cost here. So for a very long time, it will be possible to deliver much, much cheaper headsets with LCD panels. But I expect that eventually, and I mean, when I say eventually, I'm talking about 10 or 15 years down the line, we will get to the point where the industry and headsets are so big and so popular that the OLED micro display production supply chain will just be at the scale that they can push these things out at very low cost.
So I want to point out, as many people did in the chat here now, that you have basically done the Green Lantern oath several times today, or the gray lantern if you're on LCD. You talk about cost of these OLED displays. Cost isn't just monetary. What about the power draw on these things? Are we triple stacking and bright nits and all that? Are these things going to be killing our battery even more than the fast LCDs are at this point?
So the draw is fairly similar. They're in the same kind of category. The advanced micro OLED displays that sadly it's Bradley was referring to in the comments, the ones that are true RGB that are going to arrive in 3 or 4 years timeline, they will be much more efficient, right? And then eventually we will one day get headsets with micro LED, which is a completely new technology in itself, and that micro LED will be the most efficient of all. The efficiency levels possible there. Wabo says no, they should be slightly more efficient. Theoretically, yes. Theoretically, you would think so, but when it comes to the specific way that the current batch of first generation high density micro OLED displays are arriving, and the kind of trade offs they've had to make there to get that to work in a real lens system, it gets fairly similar. But that could also be the fact that you're comparing a 2K display to a 4K display in some ways. And just to be crystal clear, it's not all OLED displays that have this same level of cost. It's just this micro OLED. Micro OLED, it's similar to regular OLED, but it's actually manufactured with a very different process directly onto silicon. So, the PSVR 2, for example, delivers 2K OLED displays at a cost of $550, right, for the whole headset as a consumer product. But those displays are much larger. Those are regular OLED displays, and to use those in a headset, you have to have Fresnel lenses, and then that gives you one of the biggest trade-offs in PSVR 2, where people are saying, why didn't they just use pancake lenses? Well, the answer is either they would have had to use the real answer is that they started building it 6 years ago, but let's say they can magically change it in the last minute and do massive hardware engineering changes. To do that, they would have had to use LCD, which then kills off, the OLED blacks that we really praised about PSVR 2, or they have to use micro OLED displays, which would drive the cost up to a ridiculous cost and have all sorts of other problems associated with it in terms of scale, of production scale.
So we have
here from a member I just want to point out.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is from Norman Robinson. With this new display solution, would this be better for higher FOV beyond 120 degrees horizontally? So this is actually a slightly smaller display than Vision Pro's, I believe. Let me just triple check that for you. So it would be slightly more difficult to magnify out. Yes, it is a slightly smaller one. I'll just bring up a little comparison table that we have in the article for reference. It's very challenging to magnify these very small displays over a wide field of view. What you probably would get, though, is a better vertical field of view. One of the strange decisions with Apple Vision Pro and its Sony provided display is that it has much more pixels wide than high. You see this very big disparity in aspect ratio, which is very different. Most VR displays are like close to 1:1. They're not exactly 1:1, but like Quest 3 is like 2.2K by 2K, whereas this is 3.7K by 3.2. And if you see on LGs, they have this 1:1 aspect ratio. So a headset that uses this, if there is a headset that's going to use this, it may be able to have a better vertical field of view, because the vertical field of view was something that we really criticized in our Vision Pro review. I'm talking about a lot of criticisms of Vision Pro today. Keep in mind that we are obviously talking about the limits of technology in many ways here. We did also praise a lot of things about Vision Pro, so you should go and read our full review to get the full picture here. It's just that one of the big issues with it is that the vertical field of view is noticeably narrower than on something like a Quest 3.
Somebody asked earlier in the chat, why does pancake lenses lose so much brightness? Just really quickly, because it bounces. The light has to bounce like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 times before it comes out to your eyeball. And that's how they get it smaller, thinner, lighter, is that the light goes in and basically does a quick trip around a couple times before it comes out. If it's not bright enough, by the time it gets to you, you don't see it. So that's where pancake gives you, because what they're doing is, the reason they call it pancake is because they're literally squeezing several pieces of optics together and just squishing them flat, and well, as flat as they can get it, and then the light bounces around and then comes out. So that's kind of the not too complicated version of
pancake. Exactly. There's a lot of loss in that reflection that goes on. The technical name for pancake lenses, or at least the whole class of optics, is folded optics, where they're really kind of like folding the optics in. Just a quick image here. Here is the the view of our subjective depiction of Vision Pro's vertical field of view. You have this obviously in all the headsets. You lack a lot of peripheral vision, but this vertical field of view really matters when you're at a desk, for example. In Quest 3, I can much more comfortably see my keyboard. It also matters when you're walking around. A lot of the time, if you're walking around and pass through, I can't see the ground in Vision Pro. And I remember when I was using it outdoors, which I don't recommend, but I tried it out to see what it was like when I was walking around New York. I had to like look down at my feet as I was stepping on to different parts of the pavement so I didn't trip. Whereas I've tried the same with the Quest 3, and you have this sort of better awareness. Still not perfect. The Quest 3 does not have full vertical field of view, but it's a lot taller and you can actually see the ground, which really feels great.
So Guy is asking which headset is planning on using those LG panels. Too soon to tell? Yes, it's very, very too soon to tell, because as we're going to speak about here in a little bit, we're not really sure what the relationship right now with Meta, LG, Lenovo, other people, like, we're not really sure what this is planned for just now.
Yeah, so to be clear, LG has not announced that this is coming to any product. As sadly, as Bradley points out, they haven't even built a pilot line yet. There are no plans to mass produce this. This is a display that they are showing, right? Their engineers have built the display. They have it built. They have not made a production line for it. This is not something that they are putting in to mass production. As we point out in this show many, many times, building a prototype and mass producing something are completely different things. And I think one of the things that certain people have said in recent years is that popular media should really put more focus into the process of mass producing something rather than inventing it, right? There's so many movies about inventors coming up with these cool things, and people have this idea that, making a cool idea in a prototype is what matters. In consumer products, it doesn't. What matters is building something that can be mass produced and then building the process to mass produce it. A concept car doesn't matter. It looks cool in a magazine. You watch a nice TV show about it, and then it doesn't exist. What matters is who can build the car at the scale of hundreds of thousands or millions of units that you can then go and buy for a price that you can afford, and what kind of things can they put into that car. So,
well, you go to a show, you go to an expo, and there are aisles and aisles of people showing displays, and then they've got, oh, look at this display, oh, okay, look at this display, oh, look at this display, whole series of them. And I've been looking at them for years, and every year they get a little bit brighter and they get a little bit smaller, or they get a little bit this or a little bit that, and there's always like 100 of them all exactly the same. But as Bradley mentioned, he said pilot line, I'm just looking for a reference model. Like, where's the reference model before we do anything else? I need to see this actual screen in an actual headset with actual lenses and tracking where I can actually try it out. Now, David, you've, just like me, probably tried plenty of reference headsets that have never made the light of day. These are just here's, if you were going to build it, here's how you'd do it. It could be 2 years before we see a reference model with this screen. And by then, who knows what comes out next?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, LG has a history in VR of doing this. As Ian loves to point out, back in 2017, LG was showing off a Steam VR headset, right? They were going to be the second Steam VR manufacturer that, after the Vive, the next one that was going to come along and also compete with the Oculus Rift was going to be LG's Steam VR headset. And it never came to market, right? It was shown off at CES. We all tried it. Everyone tried it. There were articles out of, oh, look, it's LG's Steam VR headset. There were videos hands-on with LG's Steam VR headset. We did one. I'm not criticizing the concept of it. I'm just saying this was a big thing that occurred, and then it just never happened, right? There are many, many times where either a specific component like a display or a full headset or controllers or whatever are shown. There's a big difference between making a single prototype of something and actually mass producing it. So let's go on to talk about the last piece of news, which is still relevant to LG, which is the reports about the status of their partnership with Meta and what they told an outlet. They gave a statement on this to an outlet. So the background context here is that, firstly, a Meta roadmap that leaked last year revealed that Meta had cancelled its own internal Quest Pro 2. So at one point, Meta had planned a Quest Pro successor, Quest Pro 2, for 2024, this year. In a parallel universe, Meta has been getting ready to ship a Quest Pro 2 later this year. But we're not in that parallel universe. We're in the universe where they cancelled it. And so over the past 18 months, in the time since that cancellation, there have been reports from multiple South Korean news outlets that claim that LG would take on the responsibility, the mantle of building Quest Pro models for future. And the first Quest Pro from LG, whether it actually be called that, for now, for simplicity's reason, we'll call it Quest Pro 2, was supposed to come in 2025, next year, for around $2,000. So that was supposed to be what was happening. And so that was only just reports, right? There's just reports from South Korean news outlets. LG is a South Korean company, for context, so they're in close proximity and would have, personal face-to-face sources at these kind of companies. So that was reports. Now, following these reports, in February of this year, LG and Meta officially confirmed an XR strategic collaboration, aka partnership, including on next-gen XR device development, although neither company was more specific on what exactly that would entail. So the partnership's confirmed in February. And so what happened over the weekend is that multiple South Korean news outlets reported that the headset, Quest Pro 2, whatever it would be called, had now been delayed from 2025 to 2027, and that LG had gone sour on this partnership. So they were saying that there were significant difference of opinion between LG and Meta, and that LG believes there isn't enough synergy between the two companies. And these reports also both said that LG was talking to other US tech companies, right? So trouble in paradise, and they're off talking to someone else, with Amazon being the top contender for a new partnership. Weird choice, but we'll get onto that soon. So one of these outlets even claimed that LG had ended the partnership with Meta after just 2 months, ended the partnership. Just 3 months, correction, had ended that partnership. However, LG denied that they had ended the partnership to a third South Korean news outlet and gave a statement. They said, LG Electronics continues the XR partnership with Meta forged in February, but is controlling its pace. Now, that fact that what they denied is that they cancelled the partnership, but they did not deny delaying the headset, and they did specifically say they are controlling its pace, strongly suggests to me that the reports about the headset being pushed out way into the future, 2027, are accurate, but that they have outright denied that the partnership itself is cancelled. The first time that we saw evidence that there might be something going on wrong with this partnership was when Meta revealed its Horizon OS strategy, right? You remember last month, it was the biggest news. We talked about it so much on this show, and we will talk about it many times, I'm sure, that Meta is renaming the Quest system software to Horizon OS and will provide it to third-party manufacturers, beginning with Asus and Lenovo. And one of the things we pointed out on this show and in our article about it at the time was, why does this announcement not include LG? Why, given that they have just 2 months prior announced this partnership, are they not saying, oh, and LG will be building a headset for this as well? That, to me, suggests that there was something weird going on with this partnership, and now we are seeing these reports showing that there is indeed trouble in paradise. It may be the case that Meta brought in Asus and Lenovo as near-term replacements for LG, and that they simply are disagreeing on either what kind of specs to go for the headset, what strategy to go, what pricing, who does what, the content. There could be all sorts of things that have just not been figured out. I'm seeing a comment here from Spatial Big suggesting that they've decided to go higher end due to Apple. One of the most interesting claims I saw was someone speculating maybe Meta wanted LG to release a LCD headset and LG wanted to wait for its own OLED micro displays that we just talked about. There's lots of possibilities here, but what is very clear is that Meta has in some way made a mistake in doing this, because if it is true that they have essentially outsourced Quest Pro 2 to LG, and now LG has decided that they want to wait until 2027, that is going to be a 5-year gap for a Quest Pro successor. And Quest Pro is already woefully outdated.
I disagree on okay. So LG isn't mentioned as a in the list of people who they're going to give Horizon OS to. So I'm going to start calling it HOS because AVP, HOS, OMG, whatever, LOL. Horizon OS wouldn't go to LG because LG isn't making their own headset. LG is making a headset for Meta. And so
it wasn't clear. Like, the reports are not clear on what that was. It's very possible that LG would. It's possible that LG was going to build a spiritual successor to Quest Pro, and it's still called like the LG. I don't know. Give me a name. LG headset.
Well, right? Here, I think they're giving us the name right here. So LG reportedly delaying Quest Pro 2 to 27 as it's saying it's controlling its pace. Maybe the headset is going to be called the LG Pace. You know, I mean, if we're going to have Rumorville, then that's...
Someone put that in the comments.
Did they?
Before you said that, which is remarkable.
Good. That's awesome. I love it. Did we have another... let's see here. So it looks like we have Norman Robinson. I'm curious to know if any VR company has considered the flat Meta lens product to provide light bending without size penalty. I don't know that, David. Are you familiar with that technology?
Yeah, we haven't reported on that yet. There are a lot of startups that have these claims of, novel technology. Again, we have to come back to that difference between a prototype and manufacturing, right? There is a big difference between a lens that can be put into a prototype headset and a lens that a factory can put out tens of thousands of units a month at a reasonable cost and without defects, and that actually works with real life displays as well. So we'll look into that more for you. You've made a comment there. Thank you very much for the $5. I will look into that more for you. But for now, that's the general answer I would give you there. But yeah, again, to come back to what you're saying about this LG headset, it does sound to me like the plan was that it would be an LG headset, even if it had co-branding, right? Even if it was the LG Meta Quest Pro or the LG Quest Pro, or even if it was something completely different, like let's say Pace, the LG Pace. That's still something that would have been running Horizon OS. But I wonder which. I think Lenovo is probably going to be the company that takes up that mantle now. I think it's very clear from the Horizon OS announcement that Zuckerberg described one of these headsets as, being a high-end headset with the highest resolution OLED displays. What Meta seems focused on doing for now and in the very long term, and for what they've been focused on for the past 3 years, is expanding the size of the market on the scale of tens of millions, right? If you look at what Meta's next move is, based on what we've seen in many, many reports over the past year, and you can go on to UploadVR.com and look at everything we've heard about the cheaper Quest 3, is that they're going the opposite direction. They're not going for a pro headset next. They're going for a cheaper headset. For many people, $500 is already too much for a headset, and they want a $300 version that can play the same content but doesn't have quite as good lenses, right? The market for the market for these high-end headsets is not fully there yet. If you're Apple and you can give people all of their existing iPad OS content and bring in their Mac in a really great way and deliver a really high-quality software experience, then, and you're Apple and you can charge those sort of prices. But it's not clear yet that there is a non-trivial market size for headsets that are at a high-end cost, that, given the content that is available today. And with companies like Lenovo and potentially Asus, depending on where their pricing, are going to be proving that out. Because you have to remember, Quest Pro dramatically failed, right? Quest Pro failed. It is probably Meta's lowest selling headset ever. if I'm not forgetting one. I don't think there was any Meta headset that was actually a
Go.
consumer product that sold
Oculus
as
Go.
badly as Quest Pro.
Oculus Go.
Oculus Go sold a lot of units. It had terrible retention, but it was $200, right? It sold millions of units. The problem is that people put it down 2 weeks later and then never used it again.
Maybe they
the
should have
Quest
had a
Pro
good
didn't
TV
sell the
app.
units in the first place.
I don't know. The Go is one of those headsets where I loved it. I thought it was great. Best thing about Go was how light it was, how well it fit over my glasses, and the strap was nice and soft. It was light. I could lay in my bed and watch TV, and I loved it. But it's the same with the Quest 1. Like, Meta should open source all of the, like, make it so you could flash different things onto it and keep it alive for what it's capable of doing. At least that's what I think that they should do with this stuff. Go was the first Quest 2. That's what Spatial Big says. I don't know. It is weird that there's going to be all these headsets just kind of chilling different places that can't play or anything or consume anything. I don't know.
I mean, they open sourced, or they didn't open source. Sorry, they opened the bootloader for the original Go. Right, you can flash it on. The problem is nobody bothered to go make a new operating system for it. Why would you bother? It's a 3DOF headset. It doesn't have track controllers. It doesn't even have a camera. You can't manually implement hand tracking. It just didn't have the capabilities. It was from an era where somehow the executives at Facebook just didn't understand that there are minimum requirements for this technology.
Well, if there
are certain minimum things you need. And we've seen Hugo Barra, who was the VP of VR at the time, come out recently and say for Oculus Go, this thing, people didn't use it. Like they picked it up and 2 weeks later, they just stopped using it.
But with millions of them out there, we should have XDA forums should have an entire group of people who are working on making custom software for this. If there are millions of them out there, millions,
they could. Someone could do this, and they just didn't. Because why would you? Why would you bother when there's so many more?
Because there are
cool
millions of them out there. That's why. Oh no, that's a fun little tangent.
Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, pointing out in our comment that the lenses in the Quest 3S or Quest 3 Lite or whatever it ends up being called are the same lenses as the Oculus Go. That is very, very true. The Oculus Go introduced the lenses. One of the great things about Go was its lenses, right? They were way ahead of its time. They took what was great about the original Rift's lenses and got rid of most of the God rays. People think that like the Quest 2 or Quest 1 or Go has bad God rays. You should have seen the original Rift. The God rays between the Rift and the Go were killed off by like 80%. And those lenses were so good. They were pretty much the best Fresnel lenses that were made, that were in a product of anywhere near that price point, right? They were so good that they used them again in Quest and Rift S and Quest 2 and now potentially Quest 3S. And so the only new lenses Meta ever introduced since Go were the Quest Pro and Quest 3 lenses, which are obviously now the best in class pancake lenses. They're incredible. Again, despite Vision Pro costing 7 times more, Quest 3 has better lenses, which is remarkable when it just comes to what Meta's put in investment there. But you can't ship something with those lenses at the kind of price that a Quest 2 or a Quest 3S/Quest 3 Lite is going to be. People are pointing out rightly, though, that Go was very much an ancestor to Quest 2, right? In a way, Quest 2 was like Quest 2 was like Quest 1 and Go had a baby with a much faster chip than either. If you look at its design, it really is.
Yeah.
So,
I'm wearing the Quest 3 right now with, so I've got the prescription lenses from Zenny in, and then I've got the Bobo VR, I don't remember, M3 Pro, whatever strap. And so I've taken the face part off, so I can actually see my real hands down here. I'm wearing them. The actual headset is like out past my face, and it feels wonderful. It feels amazing. It feels like my Quest Pro and my Quest 3 had a baby, because that's what headsets do now, is they have babies. which I'm okay with. I'd like to take like the Sword of Damocles and like the Go and see what kind of baby that would make. See, now you got me on that weird tangent. Anyway, right. So, David, I mean, did we cover everything?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I was just going to say on your point about being able to use very different kinds of straps and head clamps and whatever you want and designs on the Quest headsets really don't get enough credit for that, right? The modability, the fact that you can have a completely different head strap design based on what you want. You can have your standard cloth strap that comes with it. You can have an elite strap. You can have a halo strap. No other major headset lets you do that, right? There's no other major headset that's designed to let you do this. And based on what we know about Quest 3S, it will Quest 3 Lite, it will probably be compatible with all the same accessories that Quest 3 is. So you'll have that same commonality between them. And because this is something that third-party makers can do, it's completely valid to point out that Meta's official Elite Strap is very pricey, and as are many of their official accessories. But you go onto Amazon and there are so many that are just whatever cost you want, right? They come down to like $20 for a strap or $20 for a case and, $15 for a stand. People that say that their favorite thing about Quest Pro is the head strap design, well, you can, as you do yourself, very easily get that with your Quest 3 anytime you want.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. You mentioned the Quest 3S or Quest 3L Lite or whatever. So for you AVP folks out there, I guess we'll call that the MQ3L. Like suddenly all these headsets have Star Wars Android naming conventions. I don't know what's going on here. Well, David, I'll tell you what, I've enjoyed being on the show. Again, this has been a real pleasure interacting with the audience. It's one thing to just watch it, on a side screen while I'm doing other things, but being here and actually having a conversation with our wonderful audience, it's just so much fun. And I really do enjoy it. And I don't know how much you enjoyed not having Ian here. Hi, Ian. I'm sure you're watching. How you doing? Here's me stealing your job. I don't know, David. Do we have anything else that we want to cover here before we cut everybody loose?
Yeah, I think we've covered everything. I think when you're on the show versus Ian, it's neither better or worse. They're just different, different tone, different style, different things get covered. That's my very diplomatic answer. Although that actually is genuinely my real answer, to be honest. There's different ways to cover this tech. There's certain things that you bring up that Ian wouldn't have brought up. There's certain things that Ian brings up that you wouldn't have brought up. And thank you again, as always, to our audience for the really high quality of comments and discussion we have. And, we don't even need to moderate it. I hope saying that hasn't cursed this, but, we just have such a really high quality conversation here that it sorts out itself. And, we're constantly looking down at the virtual tablet here to see your comments to inform our discussion. Thank you to Sadly It's Bradley for joining in and bringing in some insights for the future of micro-OLED, the ideal display tech for VR, I think we can unequivocally say for now. We do plan to cover the Microsoft news that was just announced. It was just announced pretty much right before we came into the show. So that's something that we will have an article for either later today or early tomorrow, discussing that and contextualizing it. And then next week on this show, we will talk about that in more detail. So thank you to everyone in our comments. Thank you to Guy Godin, developer of Virtual Desktop, for tuning in. Yes.
I want to remind everyone to go, now that you can do it, go sign in and become a member at UploadVR.com. You can either be a freebie member and be able to make comments at the bottom of the articles. And I got to tell you, seeing comments on articles again, that's a lot of fun. I look forward to hearing everybody's intelligent, informed opinions on what we write. Number two, you could sign up at $3.99 a month and get no ads, which I know is a lot of fun to not have to deal with ads on the site. But then there's also, what are we just calling them? Just patrons? Is that what this is?
UploadVR patronage, yeah.
Yeah. So for $29.99 a month, you can assure that this level of quality programming can continue. And plus, you get your name on our About page as one of our super duper much loved patrons. But we love everyone. Even if you're looking at our programmatic ads and not leaving comments, we still love you. Continue to read and share and do all that fun stuff. And then we've got a summer showcase coming up, and deadline's coming up soon to submit. So if you have a game or title, it doesn't have to be a game. Maybe you have an experience or something, an app that you want to share with our audience, then the summer showcase is a great way for you to do that. There are also sponsorship options available if you're in for that as well. Okay. I guess that's all we have for this episode. Look at that. We're exactly an hour and a half. David, how'd we pull that off? I don't know.
Yeah, unlike a lot of the episodes with Ian where we end up like 3 hours. We
right? It's like those family members that it's like, okay, it's time for you guys to leave. Go. The light's on in the back. Go. Your set is up. All right, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yes. Thank you very much for watching and listening. We'll see you in the future. Bye-bye.